Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on the 14 reflex point what cause negative reaction. I'm very pleased to have Dr. Angel today. How are you, Angel?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It was such a great time, our last seminar, where we talked about the spinal reflex points, and we have had a lot of good positive feedback, and I hope today's lecture on the scapular, and the scapular has at the end of the scapula the cartilage, how much we can sometimes unintentionally do damage to the horses. And I'm eager to hear, of course, from you, Angel, is how and what you see in your field when it comes to shoulder problems. But
Yes.
let me just start quick by sharing with you again those different points like we talked and going to talk. And now we're going to focus on this point right here. This is in front of that pink area where saddles have been made and focused for many years. Then you can of course say, what has that to do with the saddle? It sits way up there. You know, and I hear sometimes people say, oh, my saddle is so designed it doesn't impede with the shoulder because the horse doesn't need to move the shoulder back. And I mean, it's amazing when you hear stories like that. It says, okay, that horse doesn't move, or what is their comment? You know, the fact is that when the horse moves, the scapula moves upwards, backwards, and of course, the saddle doesn't fit right. It will be a problem, and that's what, as I mentioned last time, people try for thousands of years to really get the best and optimization between the relationship of horse, saddle, and man, of course. And the mapping is something we really focus on it. Look at the horse's back, where your saddle sits, and then they have simple numbers where they go to the end of the mane, and that's a good starting point. You want to find the edge of the scapular. You can see how at the flank the hair comes up this way, and then the hair comes from the back this way. In the cavalry time, they talked about the rain line, because when the horse gets rained on it, that's where the water runs down. So not many rider, and for sure not many saddlers, can count all these 6 lumbers here to find exactly where the area is. So line 4 is really an area where you want to stop putting excess pressure. We have saddles where it sits from line 1 all the way to line 5, like army saddle, packing saddle, western saddle, some baroque saddles, gated saddles. But that means that the main contact should always sit between line 2 and 4. And of course, this dotted line is where we talk about is the balance point. Looking from the top here, you can see how the rib cage goes narrow, right? So that's just a view. Very few of us took actually a picture from our own horse from the much I guess. From the top down, it looks really differently when you're just sitting on the horse and you're looking forward. That's a interesting view. We see it sometimes. And then of course we have different muscle groups which try to avoid and focus what we always have done to sit on this the main contact on that belly of the muscle of the longest back muscle, the longissimus dorsi. So how do we want to sit on the horse? I mean, we have so many different disciplines in Western as well as English, sport or pleasure. But what is being taught is to be a light, pliable seat rider, which means you want to move with the movement of the horse, not against it, which is very hard when you sit on the horse like you sit on the toilet or at the desk. Okay? We could wear that as a chair seat. So many different seating, how to sit in the saddle, what discipline, but it all boils pretty much down to it. As humans, we learn to balance ourselves on our feet, and when we sit, we balance ourselves on our seat, not on our feet. So the feet are most of the time underneath us when we stand. When we sit on the horse, the feet still should be underneath us. And then there's other good analogies. When imagine you swimming down a river, sitting on an oil barrel. So sitting left to right is kind of important if you don't want to fall in the water. So I find these pictures kind of neat because they indicate how balance all meets. So here comes now the interface, the saddle between two beings. And today we talk about the top part of the shoulder, the cartilage, and the shoulder itself, how it implements. And we see this in Western as well as in English, that they sometimes get written before they're 5 years old. And this scapular, if you look at the equine skeleton maturity timeline, okay, doesn't develop until the horse is 4 years old. So when a horse gets to the racetrack at 1.5, at 2 years, they're already on the track and racing. And the same in the Western world, you can see 2 years, the horse is just barely developed to here. So that, of course, has an impact. And when I understand my horse carries weight, it's kind of like I do bodybuilding, because I have now a natural weight and lift it and push it here, then my shoulders get wider or my muscles get stronger. And I'm talking about the muscles what hold this entire rib cage off the shoulder blade. This is the shoulder blade there, and the upper arm, the serratus and pectoralis. So when the shoulder gets wider and my saddle tree doesn't fit, it might be a problem when the shoulder moves upwards, backwards. Here we see this veterinarian dissected a horse. The horse is laying on the side. Horse is head in this direction. They put a tree on top, right? And they show often the trees, the width is measured from D-ring to D-ring. Okay, it's not wide enough, or often the angle from the D-ring down doesn't match the angle of the shoulder. Here you see underneath this tissue, the shoulder blade, and here she took the shoulder blade out, and this is the cartilage we're going to talk about today. What more and more people who do dissection find, which is quite a problem, because let's face it, when the horse's leg goes forward, okay, that leg goes forward, it pushes the upper arm up, and then the scapula comes towards, and it should slide underneath the shoulder. I find many manufacturing still produces saddles with the tree point forward, which you have never seen 150 or 200 years ago. They made the saddle opposite in the direction of, you see the gray stuff here, that's the cartilage, in that direction. So I'm going to come back to that, but at this stage I would like to have you, Dr. Angel, to talk a little bit what you see in the field and what you noticed and how important is the freedom of the shoulder.
Yeah, definitely. So as an equine body worker, a chiropractor, and also doing other equine modalities, it's actually it's quite a common problem that you see restriction of the range of motion of the shoulder because of, like what you were saying, oftentimes the saddle is restricting. Because if you look at this picture, there's actually a lot of owners don't realize the range of motion that should be happening. They don't know that they can actually, move the scapula back that far. So oftentimes they're not realizing that their horse isn't moving correctly. And it is a very, very common problem. Also, a lot of times people want to tend to move that saddle a little bit too forward. So it's sitting on the cartilage. They think it's supposed to sit in that position. They're not giving, the shoulder enough room. So it is actually quite a common problem. It's great that we're doing this video because I think a lot of owners need to be aware of it, because definitely it's not just something that's going to, cause issues with the horse immediately when you're riding them with a saddle that's impending movement, but also you see a lot of chronic things happening with them, because once they can't move that shoulder back properly, they start to kind of short step and they move a lot differently than they should. And it just becomes like this repetitive motion thing where they're compensating for that, and it causes a lot of body issues in them. So as a body worker, you can go out and work on that horse, all day, every day, but you're not going to fix it unless the owners address the saddle issue.
Right. And you just mentioned sometimes people even start by putting the saddle too far forward.
Mm-hmm.
What disciplines do you find is the most common pattern?
Where they tend to put it, they tend to a lot of times want to have it kind of right over that scapula cartilage that we were talking about, which is a trigger point. for whatever reason, a lot of people want to sit it there, and it will usually tend to, once the horse starts moving, it will tend to kind of shift back a little bit, but then people think that it's sliding back too far and they want to try to hold it forward for some reason. So I think people need to understand where the saddle should be fitting and understand the anatomy of the horse. And like you were saying, how it should be rotating back and giving that movement.
Yeah. Do you find that dressage riders do it mainly, the endurance riders, the hunter jumper riders? Who do you feel?
It is often, so it's usually English disciplines. I do see a little bit of it with the Western saddle, but like we said, the Western saddle may appear to be a little bit too forward, but the actual tree is further back. Yes. So it does definitely tend to be more of the English disciplines.
Yeah, I find it when I work with jumper riders, particular hunters. They put this
hunter jumpers definitely.
Yeah, and I asked, I mean, the saddle slides there anyway. Oh, no. I want to put a strong breastplate on it and it won't slide back.
Yeah, they try to hold it in place with the breast collar, but it needs to go back to where it should be sitting.
Yeah. So I heard that there are special pills what makes cartilage regrow. But once that cartilage on the shoulder is damaged, like we just saw in that slide I showed, is it really possible for that to regrow? Or is this just
not really? The problem is there's not a lot of blood flow to it. So it's one of those things that it can be really difficult to actually completely repair it. There are supplements that can help. Things like cold laser therapy can help with it. But once you have damage, especially if it's been chronic, over the years damage, you're not going to restore it completely.
Right. So the best way then is to prevent
it. Prevention is always the best.
Right. And because of, like if I bend my ear, right, I don't really see a problem. It doesn't hurt. Maybe it hurts when I pull my skin. But like you said, there's so little circulation in there. And there's also, and I'm going on a limb here, but I don't think there's any nerve endings in there either, isn't it? In the
not really. Yeah, not really. And a lot of times they will have, the saddle will just kind of pinch off blood and nerve supply. So the horse just goes numb, basically. They're not really feeling a whole lot of what's going on. Once it's the same thing. I don't know if people have ever experienced it, but if you have something that's a little too tight on you, it might kind of irritate you at first, but then eventually it just kind of goes numb and you don't notice it. Right. So the same thing happens oftentimes with the horse. They might be a little bit, when people will say, oh, my horse takes a while to warm up under saddle, because at first they're kind of, like they're kind of like bucky and like, not wanting to do things. And then after a bit they calm down. That's because they went numb. They can't feel it anymore.
Well, and especially in areas where there's, like you said, already very little blood circulation, such as the scapular, the cartilage. Now, here's another factor which I find very irritating, is that sometimes people move the saddle extra far back to avoid exactly what we talk about, damage to the horse's scapular. What we see all the time is that the saddle will go to there and nestles into the spots. And what I mean with nestles into the spots, if you look, as I said, there's one slide from the top down, the rib cage goes narrow to the front. And almost every single saddle, Western, Army saddles, Baroque saddles, English, they have what we call 3 points. And these 3 points act like a bumper, or like a unit you put between the pier and the boat. What do you call these rubber thingies where you hang over the boat so it doesn't crash in?
Yeah,
I have a brain
bumper. Yeah, it's like a kind of like a buoy bumper type thing. But yeah, I know what you're thinking about.
Right. So you can't tie the boat 5 feet away from the buoy, from the pier. The water, the swell, pushes the boat against it. Right. And if you don't put that bump in between, the pier wrecks the boat. So because of the water wants to push it against the pier, and because of the looking from the top, the pear shape look like rib cage, or it goes narrow to the front, the saddle and the girth will always go to the narrow spot. And what it looks for is the end of the shoulder blade, which has this cartilage. And when you girth the saddle too far back, guess what? The saddle will not going to stay there. It will go forward and looks for the bumper. And for like bumper, I think it's called bumper. I don't even know. I'm just guessing. So another interesting fact is what happens if I put the saddle too far forward. We're now running the risk that the saddle is sitting what we call bridging. The middle doesn't touch and sits mainly on the shoulder cartilage, and it sits then heavy duty into the back. Have you seen white hairs on horses you do? And if you've seen the white hairs, where do you see the most common white hairs when you have clients bringing their horses to you?
Yeah, so most commonly it's over the wither area, but as you said, if you have bridging occurring, there can also be pressure points towards the back, to the back of the saddle. But definitely the withers, I see that quite often.
Yeah, so from all the saddles I have seen, like literally worldwide, if there is a problem, then the horses is most of the time guarding his back. And when they're guarding the back, is think about your own physiology. You know, if you know you get sucker punched, you get punched in your stomach, what are you going to do? Keep it loose? No, you tighten it to protect that blow of the fist so they don't hurt your organs. So if a horse gets this constant pressure, too much on the front, too much in the back muscle stays really, really, really tight. And when the back muscle gets really, really tight, the back goes hollow. What's a downside of a horse with a tight back and hollow from your
so definitely from a bodywork perspective, they're not working their core or their top line, so you can tend to see some atrophy in that area, and they're just not going to round and collect like they should be when they're moving. They get very, like you said, kind of hollowed back, kind of sway backed, and they're basically not moving even close to the way that they should be moving, which is going to cause a lot of issues long term as far as the way that they're compensating, can lead to injuries down the line, definitely arthritis and like kissing spine and different issues of that nature. So definitely it's so important that they can move that scapula properly and engage their top line when they're moving. And they should, as you were mentioning before, they should be building those muscles. You shouldn't see those muscles disappearing through work. You should see them building and getting bigger and stronger as the horse is working.
Right. So when I'm listening to you and I'm thinking back and with experts I work together, and they talk about you don't want to work your horses upside down, when the horse is really hollow and bridging the back. You want the back to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is a term you hear pretty much everywhere in the saddle fitting language or trainers. I have yet to hear a customer who says, "Oh, I'm trying really hard to ride my horse on the forehand." We kind of know that's what we're trying to avoid, and we would like to have the horse not on the forehand. So we would like to see the horse off the forehand. But the problem comes when we have pictures like, let me show you a picture here, pictures like this. Let's say you're a trainer and you get a horse in and you look at after his shoeing and you look after everything you can from a body worker's perspective and so on and so forth. Let's say you say, okay, I would like to ride this horse now. And the horse has previously gone through a lot of problems. This is the wither area here, and you can see the overrider and dorsal-spinal processes. Sometimes they calcify, sometimes they shift. And how much can you work on these type of horses if they're not calcify? And what is sort of the healing process? How long does it take?
Once there's calcification and there's fusions that take place, you'll never fix that. You can slow down the rate of degeneration just through making sure that the saddle's fitting properly, doing body work. There's a few different things that we can do to provide this horse with comfort. But when you let it get to that point, it's not something that you can go in from a bodywork standpoint and actually fix it, unfortunately. So I always tell people at this point, it's about, keeping the horse comfortable and making sure that we're not continuing to contribute to the degeneration that's taking place.
Do you and call these horses then unrideable, or are these horses still rideable?
It depends. I mean, some of them are still rideable. Some of them definitely will not be rideable to the extent of being competitive and things of that nature. Sometimes it can actually be good for them to just get out and move and, you know, have movement. But it depends on their level of pain, obviously, and where they are as far as the rate of fusion and degeneration that's taking place.
So let's say this horse is rideable, and let's say this horse is jumping 1.60 m or goes 4-star eventing, and you see a lot of eventers with the withers like this.
Yeah, a lot of people do push them through with it, and unfortunately, I think it's not really fair to a lot of the horses, especially when they're asking them to compete at that level and they have restrictions like this. They'll not be able to do it to their full ability. So it is pretty sad when you see, especially these, you know, a lot of these horses are really expensive too. You see people spending a lot of money on horses like this that have basically already been ruined more or less by the way that people have been riding and saddling them.
Yeah. So do you remember the one slide I had up last time where I showed the first make of saddles, how they were in the medieval times, very wide in the middle and very little in the front and back?
Yes.
And how it's complete 180 degrees. Now there's a lot of saddle tree in the front and a lot of saddle tree in the back and very little in the middle. So
yeah. So what do you think changed the way that people were making saddles?
Fashion, design, and manufacturing costs. Very simple. And I always like to say, follow the money. You know, so in this industry, you know it yourself. You have horses too, correct? And you have barn. So everything gets more expensive, from hay to finding staff to you name it. And then if saddles, doesn't matter where they're produced, you know, have to be shipped around the world. And then if saddles have to be sold through multiple outlets, from a manufacturer to the wholesaler, to the retailer, to the saddle fitter, to the end consumer, they all want a piece of pie. They all want to make a lot of money in order to survive. So the only way you can do it, you can produce it with very inexpensive material, with very inexpensive labor somewhere, so everybody makes a lot of money. So you can make it look from the outside, wow, look how nice it is, you know? Like the Germans are so proud of their Mercedes, but don't tell them their star, what is on the hood, is made in China. So that example. But with saddles, you really don't know where they're made. And then the question comes, how come they deviated as an interface between two medium, the rider and the horse, to only a commodity for a rider, so it feels good to them, without any conscientious or any thought how this actually fits the anatomy of the horse. In my industry, I find it very visual. You can really see when the saddle fitter sells saddle fitting to the client this way. I fit my saddle, so my saddle fits on your selected horse. Then their saddle fitters, what I like to follow, I fit my saddle to the anatomy, biomechanics, and physiology of your horse. It sounds the same, doesn't it? But if I have to adjust a saddle to fit this horse, what you see here in this picture, there's two ways. One is where you clamp it like a clothespin on top of the spine along the top part. So it has a very narrow gullet and it clamps on this. And where the tree parts really flare away, it looks like this here. You see a English saddle, for example, and you see how this comes in and then goes out.
Yes.
And that metal part, what you see, right? That's when you girth it up, you put a lot of force in it, or you have it this way. See how narrow it is here, and it really flares out. And then where the English saddle always made, sorry, the Western or Army saddle, packing saddle, always make sure you stay away from everything and focus here. Okay, you focus here. That's where you put the contact. That saddle, what we see a lot now, focus here, clamps here, and then flares away here.
Hmm.
So that way, we call it the clothespin fit. So it just sits on top of the ligaments, multifidus on the spine, and then it flares away. So it's a very easy test. You can just look at it and flip your saddle over if it's English. Barely any Western saddle have that issue. But if it's English, you see many 1 or 2 fingers here. And you see them then in here. This needs to be a minimum of 5 inches. That may be 2.5. That's not 5 inches. So why is this so high? Because we buy a lot of horses from the racetrack, because we have a lot of horses, like we already discussed, in an international sport, who either upside down ridden, have other problems, didn't train properly, but they're winning.
Hmm.
So the only way they think they can fit it by putting so much pressure on a group of muscles, which are so important for the horse to carry themselves. If you look how deep and how many muscle group, I mean, I'm singing to the choir here, you know all that. But for all you folks who are watching, there's a lot of tissue you don't want to squish. Okay, so if we focus here, and back to your question, why has that deviated? Well, that requires to pay a little bit more attention to fit the individual horse, especially this one in this field. Now, I'm a hunter jumper rider trainer. Okay, I don't want saddle fitted. I want one saddle that fits on all horses. If I come to your establishment and says, show me one course, what I do one adjustment, what fixes all the problems.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. You need to tailor it to the individual horse.
But what if you find a great marketing scheme and sell that? Right? You would like quadruple, you would make so much money. But do you get your emotional paycheck? No, because you know you just got the money and run. And
at the end of the day, you're not helping the horse, and it should be about helping the horses.
And that's what our listeners who they want to see. Hey, I got a really, really cool horse, but it has these issues. Has kissing spine. I got him. He's my heart horse. I love him. I had him checked out, and we can ride him. All I'm trying to say to you folks who listen, you don't have to go with the clothespin fit. Go with the tree lift fit. And the tree lift fit has been done for hundreds of thousands of years. And what does that mean? That means when the contact is where the rider would sit bareback, the contact of your tree or your saddle sits here. Okay. You want to never lose the contact there. Because if you have the ability and the skill of get the horse round, if they bring the back up, that actually decreases the pressure on the front and the back. Here is the best analogy I ever heard. And you know who told me that? One of your colleagues in Minnesota, Tracy Turner. He said to me, would you rather have a shoe with a toe box where you can wiggle your toes and it's a little loose? Or you rather have a shoe that is so tight your toes can't move, but boy, does that shoe fit on your foot. Everybody instantly said, duh, I want to wiggle my toes.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the shoulder is the toe. Think about the back of the saddle is like the heel of the shoe. Wouldn't you want to avoid blisters on the back of the heel and blood blisters on your toes? So my point is, if we go back to our ancestors and see how the saddle is designed, and if we take just a little bit time to understand if the cartilage, the shoulder, and everything you were mentioning, so vital and important for the horse to move properly, wouldn't it make sense to fit a saddle to the anatomy and physiology of the horse rather than fit a saddle to sell? And that's kind of what we're trying to convey here. We would like to have our listeners know we at Schleser and you, Dr. Angel, I think this is why you do what you do. You know, you have this incredible academy where people learn, you know, and your logo says it all, right?
Yeah.
Animals.com. Don't be an angel. I don't think anybody wants to be a horse abuser purposely.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also people need to remember too that a lot of these horses, they invest a lot into them. They invest a lot
Yeah.
into the purchase price. They invest a lot into, you know, just maintaining them. And it really isn't that much more money to get a saddle that fits them correctly. And if you look at the long run, it's going to be, you know, cheaper than if they have to go out and buy another horse because they ruined the horse that they were, you know, supposed to be using. I mean, I personally, I have a horse that's turning 24 this year, and I've had her since she was 4 years old. And I started her real slow. I waited till she was completely mature to really ask much of her. And at 24 years old, she is still everybody on my property's favorite riding horse. You cannot tell that horse is 24. I just had a student come. He spent the weekend with me because I offer this. I offer a program for students if they want to come down for, you know, a week or a weekend. They can stay at my place. We do hands-on bodywork stuff. And this particular student wanted to go for a ride, so we went on a trail ride. And I put him on my 24-year-old horse. And my sister came along and she brought her dog. And the dog got in front of the horse. We were cantering down this road, and the dog got in front of Shay, my 24-year-old, and she did a flying lead change, jumped over the dog to avoid, you know, running this over. And my student was like, "This is not a 24-year-old horse. You should see how athletic she is." And it's like, and that's the difference, really. When you do it right from the beginning and you prevent the degeneration from occurring, you can have a horse into their late 20s that is happy to keep working. So, I mean, that's really the big thing. It's like, take good care of your horse will take good care of you.
On that note, I just like to leave everybody with this one last thought. You know, if your anatomy of the horse shows that the scapula's furthest point is on the bottom there, so the shoulder blade goes up, and then you can see how far back this bottom is. If you ride Western, you never have to worry about the direction of the tree points. I'm gonna get to show you this. The direction of the tree point on all Western is always curled backwards. It's always curled backwards. Unfortunately, we have same saddle tree manufacturers where you can buy saddle trees where the point go forward, or you can have saddle trees that go backwards. When I contact them, I say, "Why do you make them forward?" No horse in the world have a scapular, has a scapular what goes this way, where the tree would go this way. There is no horse in this world where the scapula goes this way. It goes this way. Why do you make it forward? Oh, we have saddle companies who ask for forward-facing tree points. And we making trees, we don't make saddles. Why don't we do it like for thousands of years where the tree points, like on Western armies and Baroque saddles, always went backwards? So we avoid this cartilage damage, which this was all about. So little tip, ask your saddle fitter, saddle maker, can you show me and explain to me where the tree points direction is? Dr. Angel, thank you so much. And I can't wait to talk to you next time. So thank you for your time, and I hope you all enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to next time as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.